The Torah allows us to donate our organs when we die. When you're alive, you could donate organs, like you donate your kidney and so on. As far as once you're dead, there's some that say no, some say yes, but it's a very, very touchy issue, simply because there's really no need for you to donate your organs, and it's also very problematic to desecrate the dead body. So the general opinion is, don't deal with any of this, any donations of any organs or any bodies. It won't help you. Don't donate your time while you're alive. Donate your money while you're alive. Your body, the world doesn't need it. Just let HaShem take it back as it is. It's not a good idea to donate any organs, after you die, because it's very problematic as far as desecrating the dead body and so on. And there's plenty of non-Jews that are doing it anyway. But if you're alive and you don't need a certain organ, whether it be part of the liver or be a kidney, something like that, then, some even say it's a mitzvah to do it. You're saving a life or something like that. But there's better ways to do mitzvot, put it that way. There's better ways to do mitzvot than donating your body. I was asking, as a Noahide, is it okay to have dogs around when studying Torah? Yes, it's okay to have a dog around when you're studying Torah. It's not recommended, but it's not a sin. It's not a sin. It's not, dogs, have a certain level of impurity. It's more relevant to Jews, but nonetheless, it's a dog could also be a little annoying at times. Depends what kind of dog. Depends if it is, if what's going on. But again, there's no prohibition against it. There's no prohibition against it. And sometimes, if that's what's possible, that's what's possible. No problem. I read that if the Rav embarrasses his Talmid, the Talmid will merit to understand the most complex halacha of commerce. Why does this benefit come through embarrassment? Isn't it considered murder to embarrass somebody? It's a very good question. Now, there is different forms of embarrassment. There is embarrassment that is intentional, and there's embarrassment that's unintentional. Now, it's not intentional, unintentional, like we would typically understand, where unintentional would be, oh no, he didn't mean to embarrass him, and it ended up being embarrassing. And if it's intentional, it's like, yeah, I want to kill the guy, that's what embarrassment. No, that's not what I mean by that. Intentional but unintentional embarrassment, meaning it had a purpose. Sometimes a rabbi will rebuke his talmid or tell his talmid something, and that will cause embarrassment. That will cause embarrassment for the person, but that was not the purpose of the rebuke. The purpose of the rebuke, the purpose of the rabbi telling his student that he's wrong, wasn't to embarrass him. The purpose of it was to tell him whatever you needed to tell him. It caused embarrassment, but nonetheless, it wasn't the purpose of it. The latter part is if you need to embarrass the person. You need to embarrass him because he's doing something that perhaps requires embarrassment, such as the Rambam points out one of the examples in Halacha, in the Mishneh Torah. It says that if somebody talks in shul, you have to rebuke him. You have to tell him something to stop. And if they don't stop, you rebuke them. And if they don't stop, you have to embarrass them. Embarrass them publicly. Why? Since they are causing everybody's prayer in a keilah, their prayers not to be accepted by HaShem, all of their prayers are being put on hold. You have to publicly embarrass that person if they don't listen to rebuke. So that type of embarrassment is a mitzvah, even though it's an intentional embarrassment. The other embarrassment that's unintentional is also a mitzvah. It's also a mitzvah. Why? Because he was rebuking his student. He was rebuking his student for the sake of helping his student. The fact that helping him embarrassed him in the process is not a bad thing. It's a good thing that he delivered the message to him. There was no other way to do it. Meaning, it's like, for example, if you have medicine and the only way to give it to a person is through a needle. Now, no one can say needles are good and fun, okay, unless you're a crackhead. But, in reality, no one says that needles are good and fun. And I think even they don't like it. Why? Because they hurt. but you need to administer the medicine in a painful way. Why? Because you need the medicine. So sometimes the rebuke, the truth, has to come in a certain way that's painful, but nonetheless, it's not a bad thing. And if the rabbi embarrasses his talmid with a good purpose, meaning to rebuke him, to help him, to show him something, and the talmid accepts this openly and welcomingly, even though it's embarrassing for him to realize that his whole answer of what the halacha was is wrong, is Rabbi telling him, no, what you're saying is wrong, even though it took you 3 days of learning and studying and preparing, everything you said is wrong, but here's the right answer. Surely that's going to be embarrassing for that talmid, but if the talmid accepts it like he's supposed to, which is that, Baruch HaShem, although I spent 3 days getting the wrong answer, I'm still going to get fully rewarded for studying, and even more so now, I have the merit to learn the truth. Even though I spent, in essence, in some people's perspective, I wasted 3 days, and it's embarrassing that he's telling me that I'm wrong in front of 500 people because he can't afford not to tell me because they could think I would be right with the wrong answer. So it's embarrassing, but nonetheless, if the Talmid accepts this answer the way he's supposed to, that's a good thing, and that Talmid will have major merits for accepting the truth, even though it was embarrassing. A person that loves Mussar, not just loves listening to Mussar, but even accepting Mussar intentionally when the rabbi tells him he's wrong, when the rabbanit tells us she's wrong, and so on and so forth, and you need to fix yourself, and you welcome it even though it hurts, you get rewarded handsomely both in this world and the next. But if a person is embarrassing another person simply for the sake of embarrassing them, then that's obviously bad. Like you're saying, it's like murdering somebody. But like I said, there's multiple types of embarrassment, as we just mentioned. Martin, is plastic surgery kosher? If it's for a woman that is or even a man that is having major life difficulties, either they're not able to breathe, or they have some type of deformity that's causing them to be made fun of, or not get jobs, or get married, and so on, then it's good for them to do plastic surgery. Whatever they need, they should do, no problem. But if it's simply, one of these people that just doesn't like themselves and they want to look like a mannequin, and they keep adjusting every little thing in their life. They adjust their fingers and their fingernails and their chin and their tongue and their eyes and their lid. That's a crazy person. That's forbidden. A person that has certain things to make themselves better looking in certain aspects is not necessarily a bad thing. In some cases, it's actually a very good thing. It's a very good thing. But again, anything that's excessive other than Torah is not good. We should not forget our Creator. Yes, you're right. That's a given. There's even a pasuk in the Torah that says we shouldn't forget our Creator. But it's also very important to know that without our sages, we don't even know what our Creator said. See, the Christians, they don't have a very deep connection with their sages, if you will. Why? Because they have their Bible that's just simply written, and you read it in your own understanding. Even though Shlomo HaMelech says, do not rely on your own understanding, and our Torah says repeatedly, don't rely on your own understanding. In Christianity, they rely on their own understanding, and they in essence have their Bible that has the New Testament, or what we like to call False Testament, and a translation of the Torah, which they call the Old Testament, which is a mistranslation, not really a translation, because they translate things wrong on purpose in order to serve their agenda. But they say to everybody, listen, you read it and you understand what you understand out of it. Doing that creates a new religion. Doing that creates idolatry. In the Jewish religion, in the Torah world, we do not allow ourselves to understand things based on our own intellect alone. We have to have something to rely on. We either have to have a source in the Gemara, a source in Shulchan Aruch, a source in the Tanakh, a source in a Zohar, a source in the written on the oral Torah. Bottom line, we have to have a source, or from a rabbi, or a Talmid Chacham, We have to have a source. We cannot just simply say, oh, I understand it that way, and therefore it's that way. We have to have some things in the Gemara have a source from the Chumash itself, from the 5 books of Moses, and that's the highest possible level you can have. But some things, they have something from a Tanakh, Nevi'im, Ketuvim. That's called an Asmachta. It's important, but we don't paskin halacha from it. Needless to say, he still has to have a source. We do not read the Torah based on our own understanding, which means that we do not know what the Creator wants from us and what He said based on our own understanding of what the verses say. We have to have a source, meaning that you can't just read the verse and say this is what the Creator said, but rather you read the verse and you see what the sages, the Jewish sages, who toiled in Torah for their whole life, what they said this means, and that's what it means. That's what it means. In essence, we need the sages to interpret the Torah for us. We cannot interpret it ourselves. So although you're right about not forgetting our Creator, it's not as simple as that. It's not as simple as that, meaning, yes, of course, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is number one and will always be. There is no even number two. But we need to know what He said. And since we have not toiled for the last 3,000 years on our own, we are only alive 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years, whatever each person is alive in, right? 20 years, 15 years. So therefore, we're not on the level of Rashi. We're not on the level of the Baalei Tosfot, 2,000 sages. We're not on the level of the Rambam. We're not on the level of Ramban. We're not on the level of all these other sages. We're not. So we need to know what he said. What does this verse mean? Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. What does it mean? If somebody poked my eye, I could take his eye out? No, it's not what it means. That's what the literal verse says, but that's not what it means. If you look at what the sages say that eye for an eye means that you have to give them, if you hurt somebody else's eye, you have to give him the value of the eye back, meaning in money. So how come there's no dollar amount on it? Because maybe his eye, because let's say, for example, he's just a regular cleaning person. So he doesn't really need both eyes as much as, let's say, a surgeon. The surgeon, his eye's probably worth $10 million. Whereas the guy that's cleaning houses, his eye's probably worth, I don't know, a few $100,000. And again, this is hypothetical examples. Why? Because his income does not really rely on his eye, whereas his income does. He can't be a surgeon anymore. So you're hurting him a lot more, and therefore you have to pay him more. So in essence, again, if it wasn't for our sages giving us the interpretation of the Torah, which is a very fundamental part of the oral Torah, we would not know what God said. We would be dumbfounded, blind, and most likely idolaters, no different than the Christians, if we did not have our Jewish sages. So, although we obviously never forget our Creator, we always have to remember our sages as well. Noahides are allowed to study the Chumash, the Tanakh, and Mussar. That's what Noahides are supposed to study. Meaning that they study everything that's relevant to them, which is the Tanakh with commentary on it, by even though it's part of our oral Torah, it's relevant to them. They learn what happened. They not just the story, but also the behind the scenes of what happened from creation all the way to the end of the time of the prophets. Because it is relevant to them. There's many things that are relevant to them. They also can learn ethics from there. And also learning Mussar, because that's the ethics or character development that they need to learn anyway, like the rest of mankind, including the Jews. So Mussar and Tanakh are the primary places that a Noahide should find themselves, more so than anything else. Yes, there's no problem learning the entire Tanakh, but don't delve too deeply into the parts that have to do only with Am Yisrael, like specific mitzvot. Like when you get to the section that talks about tefillin, you could read the basic commentary by Rashi, what's being said there, but don't delve deeper into it. If you're a Noahide. But nonetheless, again, if you have a Tanakh with commentary by Rashi, whether you're a Jew or Gentile, you could and should learn it. What is the Messianic Era in the Tanakh and in Hebrew terminology? I ask because each time my husband hears the word Messianic, his mother tongue is Hebrew, second language is English. He understands Messianic as Messianics running around trying to be Jews. I'm unsure how to explain this to him. The Messianic era means that there is an era of that is more likely or to be the end of the world, where there is going to be certain events that take place in the world in order to prepare the world for the Mashiach to arrive. Now, we are in that Messianic era now. To learn what happens in the Messianic era, you could watch our Era of Mashiach series or some lectures that I have or Rabbi Mizrahi has that talks about the different things that will happen in the era of Mashiach. But in so many words, it's a time period where the whole world gets their last chance to do tshuva and to do the will of HaShem before the final judgment day. The final judgment day. Where in that final judgment day, everyone will be, in essence, anyone that's alive will be judged based on whether they followed what God said or not. If they followed what God said, then they will be rewarded eternally. If they don't, then they will be punished and possibly punished forever. The reason why I say possibly punished forever rather than definitely punished forever is all depending on how much they did that's against Hashem. If they did only a few things that are against Hashem, it's pretty normal, then they'll get punished, to a certain extent, but then get rewarded for the good that they did. But if they did big things, like violating Shabbat on purpose without doing tshuva, wasting seed, eating chametz on Pesach, eating food on Yom Kippur, and other types of karet sins, without rectifying those by doing tshuva, then their punishment will be permanent once the Mashiach comes. So it behooves a person to learn more and more Torah in order to do tshuva, in order to get closer to Hashem. As far as people running around saying the Mashiach is coming, or Mashiach here, or Mashiach now, yeah, that's already been happening for a long time already. It's nothing new. But the real Messianic era is in essence an era where the Hashem does different things in the world in order to prepare the world for the culmination of the world by bringing his Mashiach, who is going to, once he comes here, defeat and destroy all of the enemies of Israel and the enemies of the Torah, which is the vast majority of the world. At that point, after he destroys all of them, the righteous Jews and righteous Gentiles will serve Hashem to the fullest extent. Shortly thereafter, some say 40 years later, there will be a resurrection of the dead, which are going to be a resurrection of both the dead that were righteous and the dead that were wicked. Whereas the resurrection of the righteous, they will be resurrected and live in this world for another 1,000 years until the end of the 6,000th year. And the resurrection of the wicked will be a short-term resurrection where they will wake up, see all of the beauty and glory and awesomeness of the world and how much Hashem is rewarding all of the righteous and all of the things they're missing out on, and then they'll be destroyed. So in essence, their resurrection is a form of punishment before their bigger punishment, which is in a different place. So again, it's going to be a Messiah is going to have, the era of Mashiach is going to have multiple things. Number one, there's going to be certain things that happen in the world that test each and every single one of us to choose a side of whether you want to be with Hashem and His Torah or against it. Then the world will heat up even more so. There'll be a war called the War of Gog and Magog, where the vast majority of the world will fight against Am Yisrael and the Torah. Then the Mashiach will arrive and destroy all of the enemies of the Torah and Am Yisrael. And the only survivors will be the righteous Jews, not all Jews, just the righteous Jews, and the righteous Goyim, the righteous Noahides. Not all the Noahides, but just the righteous ones, meaning only the righteous will survive. With that being said, they will then be able to bury all of the wicked, which will take some time, several years. I think it's 7 years, burying all the wicked because there'll be a lot of dead. But you won't have to fertilize the world for a long time because of all that blood. Either way, after that, the glory of Hashem will be at the highest it's ever been. And then, we'll be able to serve Hashem for another 1,000 or so years in this world, in the last 1,000th year, before we go to a different world after this. Okay, if the righteous Jews will be resurrected from the dead when Mashiach comes, does that mean that they will leave Gan Eden to come back to live, or are they not in Gan Eden yet? Oh, very good question, Raphael. There's two Gan Edens, and there's also Olam Haba. There's Gan Eden Tachton, Gan Eden Enyon, and there's Olam Haba. So there's several different parts even within them. So everyone that's in Gan Eden is in a good place, an amazing place, and a place that's much better than this world. But this world will change into a different version of itself once there's the Mashiach comes, which will be superior to that Gan Eden that's available now. But then after that Gan Eden, this world culminates itself at the end of the 6,000th year, then they're all going to go to a different Gan Eden that's much more superior than anything else before it. And that's usually referenced to as Olam Haba. What is the purpose of a Jewish woman's life if her children already grew up and she has no eggs? Is the purpose of a Jewish woman's life to influence a husband and children to learn Torah? What if she couldn't be married for 80 years because she has no chen? This sounds more like a man asking a woman's question, which is not really the best idea, but I'll answer it anyway. A woman has a lot more purpose in life than simply having children. Anyone that thinks that the only purpose for a woman to have in the world is to have children is an idiot. Why? Because a woman is Hashem's daughter. She could fulfill mitzvot of women. She could do certain things that only women can do. And it's not just having children. Surely having children is great benefit of having women in the world, but needless to say, it's not the only one. So women can do much more than just simply have kids. But if she has the ability to have kids, she should have kids, because if it wasn't for her having kids, the rest of the world would not be able to exist. But that doesn't mean it's the only purpose. It's just part of the purpose. Now, as far as aside from that, she should, if let's say, for example, she can't have kids because you're saying she is 80 years old and she looks like a troll and she wasn't able to get married, according to what your question is, because she's so ugly. First and foremost, you should know that beauty is in the eyes of the beholder, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu has a match for everyone. Even someone that you think is ugly is has a match in the world. And to be honest with you, statistically speaking, and just from my experience in the world for a little bit of time, I can tell you that it's actually easier for ugly people to get married than for good-looking people. Much easier for them to find somebody to marry than for good-looking people. And the reason why is because they're less picky and they're looking more at a person's personality, which is really important, than they are looking at the superficial stuff like good-looking people do. And you also see that all of these celebrities that are getting divorced on a regular basis, like as if it's changing t-shirts, they're all very good-looking people, but they're miserable people with their good looks, and they're also promiscuous people. There's a Gemara of one of the princesses of the Goyim comes to one of the sages and says to him, you're a very ugly person, and the sage tells her, okay, and he gives her some advice that causes her to lose, or her father to lose, a lot of money. And then he's brought in front of the Caesar and says, "Why'd you do this to me?" He said, "Well, she said certain things, and I said something back." And I said to him, "But she's right though. You are ugly." And he says, "Well, you may or may not think I'm ugly, but if I wasn't ugly, the information that I gave her, I wouldn't have. Meaning the Torah that I know, I wouldn't have. Why? Because I would spend, if I was good looking, I would spend more of my time seeking the admiration of the public for that good looks. So there is actually certain benefits to being ugly. Next point is that most people, meaning the overwhelming majority of people, will at some point turn ugly in their life. Although most people don't necessarily think they are, but most people will turn ugly with their life due to age and different life changes. Whether it's in teenage life where you have all types of acne and different types of things in your body you have no idea what to do with, or it's when somebody simply gets old and wrinkled and they're not their former self, 20, 25 years old, bull that could rip trees out of the ground with their teeth. But the reality is that if a person thinks that looks is more important than what it is, then they may not be an ugly person physically, but they're an ugly person inside. And most likely they'll be alone or miserable or both throughout their life. So a woman does not need to be good looking in order to get married, and neither does a man. In fact, it's actually easier if you are less good looking to find somebody, because you're more likely to look for the important things in life. But either way, even with all of that being said, a woman that does not have a husband and does not have eggs to have kids can still be extremely productive and resourceful in the world by using her abilities, whether it's to work and make money or otherwise, to publicize Torah, to help the world learn more Torah by doing kiruv, by investing into Torah and so on and so forth. Which means that your question comes from lack of maturity, chauvinism, and outer ignorance. If you really look at it superficially, your question. But at the same token, it was a valuable question, because at the very least, anyone else that has your question will now be able to learn the answers and not think that the Torah is a chauvinistic, sexist type of document that thinks that only the men have value because they learn Torah. This is what the reform-minded want you to think, that only men have value. It's complete opposite. So much so that the Gemara and the Zohar Kadosh both tell us that the Mashiach is only going to come because of the merit of the righteous women. And Am Yisrael was saved from the Egyptians because of the righteous women. So obviously here we see that it's not just because of women that have kids, because some women didn't have kids, some women their kids died, some women they couldn't have kids, and so on and so forth. So it's not just because of children. There is more to life for a man or a woman than having children, although that is a very big plus. So it's a valuable question, which I appreciate, but at the same time I have to make that comment that it sounds a little bit chauvinistic, the question. But hopefully it's because you're trying to help somebody else see the truth, and not because you actually believe some of the things that seem to be implied by the question.